Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Startup Happy Hour. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and I'm here today with our guest, Brian Flynn. Brian is the co-founder at RabbitHole, which is a company that lets you earn crypto by learning how to use the latest and most popular crypto apps. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me, Diana. Great to be here.
Thanks so much for being here. So I'm going to start off and just let you talk a little bit more about RabbitHole because I'm sure I didn't do it much justice. And I know you're still in sort of the early-ish stages in the company in late 2020. So go ahead and give us a background on what RabbitHole.
Yeah, for sure. My quick background is I used to work at Dapper Labs and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to bring crypto mainstream. And one of the biggest questions that a lot of people have when first enter crypto is like, what can I actually do with it besides trade and make money? And something that we've discovered is that the UX of crypto applications are really bad. But if there was more of a visual guide to guide people down the crypto rabbit hole, then there'd be potentially more users in the crypto sphere as a whole. So what we've done is we've kind of broken up crypto applications down into tasks. And these tasks are sort of the building blocks that people are going to be using to enter the crypto economy, right? So if there's lending applications or NFT applications, we kind of break those down into the basic tasks for users to complete and earn tokens for completing those things. So we're basically creating the treasure map essentially for people to go down the crypto rabbit hole and earn first crypto for doing so.
Okay, so for people who don't come from a crypto background, can you explain what some of these tasks are? Just give an example of some of these and then how a user would go about completing.
Yeah, for sure. So first you need a crypto wallet, which is sort of your gateway to crypto applications. And you can get one on iOS, you get one as a Chrome extension. We can provide those in the notes. But the basics is you use this wallet to then go to these different applications that are on the Rabbit Hole website. And they can be things of like, different DeFi lending applications, which is decentralized finance, or NFTs, which is digital collectibles. And they can be as simple as, buy and sell these NFTs for the first time. It can be as simple as take out a loan. It can be as borrow money, right? But the interesting thing about crypto applications is that they're very playful. Some people see it as sort of like a scary and permanent thing, but they're actually more playful in some cases. So what we want to do is we want to separate kind of the signal from the noise and show the applications that are a lot useful to the crypto consumer. And that's really what we're trying to do here, just curate the highest quality crypto applications across decentralized finance and NFTs and digital collectibles and show what you can actually do with these things while earning as part of it.
Got it. Got it. Very cool. So take me back to take me back to when you were at Dapper Labs. For listeners who aren't familiar with Dapper Labs, talk about what that is and then sort of like how you got into this whole space in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. I'll start my high school background. I was actually a professional gamer, and I was a gamer for about 3 to 4 years, playing Counter-Strike and traveling across the country. And so I eventually decided to get into startups that I didn't want to be stuck in my room for the rest of my life playing games. The concept of crypto always came up in gaming, especially when trading things like Counter-Strike skins, being able to make money from just your gameplay as a whole. And in 2018 was kind of the early stages of CryptoKitties, and NFTs or digital collectibles was sort of the first thing that kind of really struck out to me as sort of like one of the first core use cases of crypto that actually made sense. And what I started doing was I started a newsletter just covering like what's going on with NFTs because nobody was really talking about it at the time. And it's kind of ironic because now you can't go a day without a big celebrity talking about NFTs and collectibles. But at the time, there was nobody talking about it. And so I was just writing about like kind of the crazy use cases going on. People doing things like patronage with NFTs, so being able to sell NFTs for environmental impact, which is even a hot topic in NFTs today. Things of like being able to have like a World Cup bracket as an NFT was an interesting one. Being able to have digital avatar items as NFTs, right? These were things that were like sort of interesting at the time, but sort of maybe even ahead of its time. But like these things were kind of like leading up to this much larger movement. And just through writing that newsletter, I got a pretty good grasp of like what's going on in the space. And that led me to getting my job at Dapper. And so I was kind of like the in-house resident expert on NFTs per se, is what they like to say, and just helping them on the product side of things, just work on different products like CryptoKitties and their new blockchain called Flow. That really led me down the path of just kind of discovering, what crypto users actually wanted, and why they even should care in the first place.
Did you come from a background of being interested in startups and entrepreneurship, or did you creating RabbitHole kind of just come about as a result of your passion for the space and, having worked in the space and seen the gaps and where, different ways where you could fill in, you were like, well, I'll step up to the seat and found a company?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I created a startup back in college, but it didn't really go anywhere, and I tried building it on Ethereum back in 2016. But really, what struck the biggest chord with me is just creating a newsletter, right? So like, I think in the last couple of years, like a lot of media businesses are becoming more like entrepreneurial as a result of like things becoming more independent. And the concept of like using crypto in the context of media business is like really interesting. It's also a hot topic today. So what I wanted to base my newsletter off of in 2018 was like, how does a independent media creator go from kind of this media in Web2 world to kind of the Web3 world in this different transition, right? And so like one thing that I did specifically, it's just kind of like the basis of RabbitHole was, I started selling my newsletter articles as NFTs back in 2018. And so the concept was that people could actually invest in me through buying my NFTs back in 2018, right? Because then it's like the equivalent of buying, Rolling Stone magazine issues before they become popular, right? And how cool would it be if you can actually own one of the Rolling Stone magazine issues before they blew up, right? Back decades ago. It's funny because one of those newsletter articles just sold for $80,000 last week. At the time, I was selling them for, like $20, $30 per issue.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah, I mean, it goes all to the artist, doesn't go to me. But it's great. It's great to support, kind of the digital artists who kind of are just leading this big NFT movement as a whole, right? But it's interesting because now that these media creators are now, using these building blocks in crypto like NFTs to create their own digital economies, right? And that's gets me excited about crypto and the possibilities. But even kind of led me down, quote unquote rabbit hole of like what's possible for people to explore this technology and to get involved.
Sure. So a couple of things here. Maybe we should have taken a step back and explain what NFTs are for listeners who aren't familiar with that. And then people who are listening and they're like, okay, so it kind of sounds like a Patreon account, right? Like you can support your favorite artist by donating to their Patreon account. Like how are NFTs different from a Patreon account, for instance?
Yeah, so the difference is that NFTs are a digital collectible without a platform, right? Is the way I like to describe it, right? So in the context of Patreon, you're dependent upon Patreon to have all the different features for you to kind of support the artist, right, or support the creator. And if Patreon goes away, then you no longer have a means of making money, right? Because that's kind of your gateway to your fans of supporting you. And there's even a limit to that in some cases, right? You would have to be in a certain geographic, you have to use a state currency, right? You can only pay in a certain amount of ways. But with NFTs, it's a little bit more interesting because you could use any type of crypto that you want from anywhere in the world. And there's no limit to it, right? And you could actually have ownership in the brand and the creator itself, right? In the Patreon model, there's no sense of ownership of what you can have in a creator. It's a straight donation model, right? So while it may seem like that NFTs right now are sort of like this digital collectible, it's sort of a way of investing in a creator or a media brand because it's getting this digital item that represents this affiliation between the fan and the creator, right? In some cases. And so I think, in a simple way of describing NFTs, it's just a digital collectible with patronage that doesn't have a platform. And so if people believe that, their digital life is valuable and will even get more valuable in the next few decades, then we will treasure what we have in our digital life, right? We treasure like our physical items in our physical life. We'll now treasure our digital items in our digital life. And so it just comes back to ownership at the end of the day. Ownership is really what matters with NFTs.
For sure. Yeah, I totally get that. So, for people listening who, maybe have been hearing about NFTs and all the big NFTs that have been selling, like the Beeple artwork that sold for $6.6 million, and they're wondering, well, why would I pay $6 million to download a JPEG? Like what is the value behind that? And I think like a lot of people are still stuck in the traditional way of thinking of like, well, art has to be physical art. I have to be able to see it. I have to be able to touch it. Otherwise, it doesn't have the same value. And so if I download an image from online or, of a clip of NBA Top Shots or whatever the case is, like that's just not valuable to me. So I think there is this just like mindset block where we're still stuck in this old way of thinking. Maybe can you talk about like how to change that shift in mindset and why maybe virtual art or virtual assets can be better than traditional physical assets?
Yeah, totally. The way I think about it is that like our digital life is almost just beginning. And it started with when the first block was actually mined on Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? But in previous Web2 platforms, you don't actually own your stuff, right? You don't own your Instagram photos, you don't own your data on Facebook, right? If those platforms go away, you don't really have ownership in it, right? Well, what blockchains actually do and NFTs actually do is you now have ownership of your stuff. And what that actually means is that, 50, 60 years from now, right, you'll still have ownership of your stuff as long as you have, your keys to your crypto wallet. And that's interesting because, the stuff that is being created today is going to have a lot of sentimental value to people way down the road, right? It's kind of like, year one of digital life, like as you kind of know it in some cases, right? And so we'll look back and like it'll seem so archaic and that we now like have this concept of like digital ownership that kind of seems so weird to us right now, but it'll seem normal to us in like a few decades. And so that's why that there's being placed a lot of value to like NFTs right now because everyone is sort of betting on this digital life in the future, right? And having NFTs in the early days is going to be seen as a hot thing in a couple of decades.
Something interesting there too is the social platforms we're on right now, Facebook, Instagram, they're centralized platforms that collect data from us and we don't have true ownership on those platforms. So if I create an Instagram post, I, spend a lot of time and effort taking these awesome photos and spend a lot of time and effort writing up these captions, spend a lot of time and effort building up a following. None of that actually belongs to me. And I know this is something that you've been thinking about lately is decentralized social platforms. And so talk a little bit more about that. Like what would a social media platform look like on the decentralized web? Would that, yeah, just like, I think that's so hard for people to even conceptualize. So if you can try to describe that.
Yeah, totally. One thing that's interesting with like social media platforms today is that when there's a new platform that comes out, the creators spend a lot of time trying to build their following. And it's sort of like a race in the beginning to kind of build that following, right? They have to kind of learn an entire new game. And they spend a lot of time trying to like bring their existing followers to the new platform as well, which is hard for a lot of creators, right? But with blockchain and crypto and even NFTs, it traveled the social graphs now travel with you, right? You're able to bring it from one platform to another. So if I have an NFT and give it to you, now that our relationship with each other can now be traversable across different platforms because that's living on chain in some context in a public blockchain, right? Now anyone can build a relationship, right, representing that like I have the NFT and gave it to you, where you're the owner of that NFT, and that is like our new on-chain social graph that's completely platform agnostic, right? So you can imagine, like a YouTube creator like Mr. Beast, like giving away tokens to all his fans, right? And now you have this on-chain social graph that's entirely platform agnostic that anyone can kind of build an entire interface around Mr. Beast and his fan, like using that representation on chain. And so I think we'll see all these different types of decentralized social networks evolve over the next, 10, 20 years or so. That's not tied to a single platform or interface like we know how like YouTube or Facebook or Instagram are today, but much more independent platforms, potentially even created by the creators themselves, that have their fan and creator relationship, living together in their own platform.
Got it. So there's obviously a lot of pros to that. Instead of, trying to grow a following on Twitter, a separate following on Instagram, a separate following on YouTube, you kind of have all of your following collected together. Like if somebody follows you, they just follow you and they see your videos, your photos, your blog posts, all of these things. But will that also make it harder for creators to get followers? Because, like now you can, if you're on Instagram, you can go to the Discover tab and discover all these new people, and maybe you find people to follow that way. Like, what is this going to look like practically is what I'm thinking for, somebody who's like an Instagram influencer, for example.
It's a really good question. I mean, I think the first thing to note is that we're going to look back in 10 years and just see that the concept of a like or even a follow is like antiquated, and that like those things probably won't be around in 5-10 years, right? It will just all be around the concept of tokens, right? So like the giving tokens is sort of the new follow, right? Or bidding on someone's NFT is the new like in some capacity, right? Because those are on-chain relationships between the creator and the fan in itself. And so I think that a lot of these creators on Instagram and YouTube are just going to be giving away tokens to their fans as a way of giving ownership in themselves, right? Because then if you're someone who's completely new and want to get discovered, right, you want to give away some tokens of yourself as a way for someone to invest in you, right, and have financial upside like in that community in itself. And that's going to be the most interesting thing at the time, when there's just so many different communities and so many different social tokens where people are just giving away ownership in themselves and in their communities, and everyone basically becomes an investor in these creators. And so the fan and the investor relationship is becoming closely tied together.
Yeah, I think we're like such early days right now. It's like talking about the internet back in like the 80s, right? It's just hard to even wrap your mind around it. But I'm sure in 20 years, we'll look back and just laugh at this conversation that we're having. So let's go back to RabbitHole. The whole idea is to onboard people on a crypto and blockchain and find fun and easy ways for them to get onboarded. So for somebody who hasn't joined this space yet, but is curious after listening to this conversation, what are, I guess, some of the most important areas that they should go research? And then if you can point them in the direction of any resources that you find to be super helpful, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing I talked about earlier was a crypto wallet. In having a crypto wallet is sort of your gateway or your tool into the world of Web3 or crypto. And it does a lot of things, right? It's not just where you hold your digital stuff, but it's also your identity in this life, right? So you no longer need a username and a password. You just need, to connect your wallet to these different applications, and it will know your public key, which is your new address. So this is a really important concept, because now as you start to, have account history and do certain transactions, these different applications, like you're building up like your own reputation, right? You're building up this own like social graph in some cases that we're kind of mentioning before. So doing that, you can then access all these different types of applications like DeFi, decentralized finance. So things like lending, borrowing money, swapping for millions of different tokens on decentralized exchanges, all through smart contracts. And then this world of NFTs as well, right? Where creators are issuing their own NFTs. And I think you'll start to see that these pieces become intertwined very closely, like NFTs and decentralized finance. With NFTs are sort of the biggest application people enter crypto through, just being able to own these like digital items. And then decentralized finance basically being the back end or the finance rails of what these NFTs live on, right? So like, for example, being able to get a loan based upon like what NFTs you own is a big thing that people are working on right now. Or being able just to pawn off your NFTs to anyone that wants to buy it at a specific price. Like these are the types of primitives and combinations that we'll see going forward, where we have an entirely new financial system built on top of this digital stuff.
So crypto wallet and then NFTs. Can you walk us through the process of an NFT? If anybody's listening out there who's an artist or a creator and they're thinking about minting their own NFT, how complicated of a process is this? And how do they get started with doing?
Yeah, for sure. So the easiest way is to go to OpenSea right now, which is a digital collectible NFT marketplace. Um, they have uh, they have this feature called lazy minting, which is being able to mint your NFTs for free. So whenever you have to mint an NFT, you usually have to pay gas. But with OpenSea, you don't have to pay gas because they do it. They put the gas on the side of the buyer in some cases, right? So you go to OpenSea, you can mint an NFT. You choose which image you want, representing as the digital collectible image, and then you can just have it. You could set whatever price you want. You can have it as an auction, right? But then you can sell it to your fans. You can create your own little digital economy of your NFTs itself. There are other platforms that you can mint your NFTs like Rareable, Zora, Super Rare. I think all of them have their own trade-offs. So it definitely depends on what the creator or the NFT minter is looking to do.
Yeah, we've seen so many different types of NFTs already. We've seen art is the most popular. We've seen video clips like from NBA Top Shots. We've seen artists give away NFTs, that represent tokens that represent a variety of different things. It could represent a new album that they're putting out, or it could represent, the ability to go to live shows or get backstage passes or whatever the case may be. What are some other applications of NFTs that you could see in the future? Or on the flip side, are there any industries where, you don't see it possible turning that into an NFT?
Yeah. Um, I think the biggest the biggest opportunity for NFTs that's like still just emerging is ticketing, actually. And ticketing in itself is interesting because there's like a huge black market and fraud for tickets to concerts as a whole. And when you have tickets as NFTs, it's much easier to prove uniqueness of an individual ticket and like what the seat number is and who owns that, right? And it can even be used as another digital form of a digital collectible for that piece of that concert or that show, right? And the other interesting thing about like NFTs in relation to tickets is that you can have secondary royalties when you sell the tickets themselves, right? So the tickets can now be traded between different fans or people attending a concert, and the concert creator can now reap the benefits of those royalties on every sale on the secondary market. And that's all provable on chain in some context. So I think you'll even see that a lot of creators who are minting their own NFTs right now use their own NFTs that they're creating for a means of access. So that because NFTs are now programmable building blocks, you can create your own locked websites where you need to have the creator's NFT to access the creator's content, right? So even in the context of like an OnlyFans, right? Like now the OnlyFans can only exist if you have that creator's NFT to access the OnlyFans. And you'll see that as a popular model, like the whole concept of owning an NFT to get access to something, whether it's a physical concert or a digital concert, really start to take off in the next 6 to 12 months because it's actually giving these digital collectibles utility value as opposed to just collectible value in itself.
I'm glad you brought up OnlyFans because I was going to ask something about that earlier when you said, one of the benefits of NFTs or decentralization is everything is recorded on chain. And so you can see a record of all of these transactions. But in some cases, maybe you don't want to leave a trail or, publicly announce that you're buying an NFT. Like if you want to buy an OnlyFans NFT or, something similar to that, and maybe you don't want all your friends seeing that you're buying this NFT. Is there a way to buy NFTs anonymously?
Your thing about a crypto wallet is that you can have multiple crypto wallets, right? You don't need to just have one, sort of that you can have like multiple digital identities online, multiple social accounts. So in that context right now, if you're doing something like that, people would probably just create a new crypto wallet to buy that NFT in itself.
Where do you see, I guess, this industry being in the next 5 or 10 years? I know it's moving so fast, and so it's hard to even predict what's going to happen in the next year. But if you were to envision where we'll be in 10 years with all of this, describe that scenario.
Yeah, yeah. It's something I've been thinking about a lot, but the concept of how everyone, so I think the Reddit GameStop fiasco in the past month is sort of a foreshadowing of what the world may look like in 5 to 10 years, right? Where everyone is an investor and investing off memes, right? So if you follow the train of thought that every creator or community will have its own token and you accept that as a belief, and that they'll be giving ownership as almost means of getting attention as a form of advertising, and getting people in the community, then everyone is going to hold some version of crypto tokens in the next 5 to 10 years. And those are going to have its own price, right? Those things are have their own price, and they're going to be changing very fast, all right? So everyone is going to be an investor, right, in that point, right? So right now, there's probably only, I think there's 13 to 15 million Robinhood traders, direct users last time I checked. But I expect there to be about 1 to 2 billion crypto traders that are trading daily because of all the different tokens that exist in these different traders and communities, right? And it will get very volatile. If you look at the Wild West, everyone's going to be seeing all these crypto prices. There's going to be millions of tokens in this context, right? But investing will start to compete with gaming in a lot of contexts, right? Because no longer will people be like playing games with their friends, but they'll be now investing with their friends because they'll be investing in their favorite brands and creators in itself, right? And you'll see this reemergence of the co-op, right? So people basically pooling their money together to now invest in things that they want, right? I think investing will become so democratized that there will not be many VCs around anymore, right? People are just going to be trying to get to early and earlier stage deals, like kind of happening right now in the market. And it's going to feel pretty crazy. So that's the 5 to 10 year scenario in my head.
Wow. Yeah, that is I mean I can't wait to see, look back on this in 10 years and see if all of that has come true, but if it does, that's pretty crazy. And with this NFT hype right now, do you see this as a bubble that's going to burst, or do you see this like long term, are we at the peak right now, or long term is this just like a small peak but we're going all the way up?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think what I tend to think about, look at, is the ratio between the number of NFT creators to collectors. Right now, there's probably much more collectors than there are minters and creators. But I think they'll reach a point where there's more creators and minters than there are collectors, right? Because anyone can now issue and create value with NFTs. And that one might take 6 months, that might take 2 years, and take 5 years. Like I don't know the timeline. But until that happens, I think that NFTs are going to be proliferating. And it will eat into a lot of social media market share, right? You're kind of already seeing this with Instagram in some contexts. You're seeing this Twitter, right? With Jack Dorsey selling his NFT the other day with the first tweet. Like there's a lot of momentum being built up with NFTs right now that can just eat into the market share of existing social media platforms. So I still think it has a long way to go.
What are your thoughts on Jack Dorsey's NFT tweet, by the way? Do you see that as just, do you see that as like actual value and legit, or do you see that as sort of just like this is getting out of control?
Um, it depends, right? Like if Twitter is around in 50 years, it has a lot of value, right? You're basically betting on the brand value of Twitter, of its relevance and kind of this new digital economy in some context. I've seen crazier things in NFTs, so I think it has some value in some context. But it's been interesting to see how many people are just selling their NFTs just as a means of giving ownership to their fans. And I think you'll see that trend continue. I wouldn't be surprised if Twitter integrated NFTs natively inside of Twitter, and being able to just see who owns an NFT on each individual tweet.
Interesting. Interesting. All right. So what's new for RabbitHole this upcoming year? What should people be looking out for?
Yeah, for sure. So right now we're working on our new onboarding and our concept of a university for the internet. So we think of RabbitHole as sort of this new age education and university where people can get involved into this new digital economy. We fully believe that crypto is the future of work. That you'll have multiple jobs working for multiple crypto networks, And we want to basically be able to educate people for this new economy. So just teaching people how to do these different jobs. So you'll be able to build a resume through doing transactions. You'll be able to get an on-chain ISA or income share agreement for doing certain transactions, and then basically be able to be learning these new jobs in these different crypto networks. So we have a long road ahead here, and it's super early days, but really excited for what we're doing at RabbitHole and trying to get more people to realize this is a new digital economy.
That was actually the first thing I wanted to talk to you about in our next segment, explain your tweet. So I'm just going to move into that. The first tweet that caught my attention was from February 6th. You tweeted, "Online courses and education will merge with blockchains in the next few years. People will move on to the next level in the course by verifying the completion of a task on chain. The next university is not built in a Slack community, but rather on chain and governed by the students." Explain a little bit more what you mean by this. And you sort of did already, but take me through, like, in real life, in practice, what is this going to look like for a college kid, someone that's going to freshman year of college? Do they go to class? Do they not go to class? Do they have professors? Do they not? Is it just videos? Like, walk me through what day-to-day looks like.
Yeah. What's interesting about blockchains is that any digital work you do is provable and verifiable on chain, right? So you can imagine even like taking an online course or even like a Code Academy type course, right? And having your output or your scores like live on chain with your digital identity, right? If you go to free code camp from Code Academy, free code camp doesn't actually know like what your progress is from Code Academy. Even if you completed 3 courses, free code camp doesn't know that. But what's interesting is that as you move from application to application in blockchains, blockchains actually know your progress and they know your skill level going from one to the next, right? So no longer do you need to kind of like build up like what your skill level is, but everyone will just know like what level you are and then your expertise in the individual skill. And this is interesting because now, in these online courses, you could have much more tailored content and educational content towards like what your particular skill level is. So no longer will you feel this concept of like, oh, I need to do the tutorial and show proof and get through all these things, but it will actually know like what content to serve you at any point in time because they can look at your proof on chain in some capacity. And this kind of eats into the university model because now you can create these massive online courses, and they can be much more tailored to a specific student instead of trying to go very wide with the content just because it kind of serves everyone's skill level. So I think it's like really early days of this, and like RabbitHole is one of the only people working on like on-chain education pieces. But like it wouldn't surprise me in 10 to 20 years, if digital work looked a lot differently and education was now like you're basically earning while you learn and earning these different crypto tokens for proving that you've done certain things, right? And that is the same equivalent of like earning your degree. And so like we'll be probably earning a degree much differently in 10, 20 years in this like digital life, right? And it's this digital world, and it will just be, it will feel a lot like a game in some context, right? So it'll no longer feel like you're learning, but it will feel like you're just doing these things because you get to make money from it right away, and the rewards look a lot different in the current structures where you're now yeah, it goes really deep, but I'm going to stop there. But see if you have any thoughts.
Well, my thoughts are, instead of being hundreds of thousands of dollars in the hole, I can actually be making money while I'm getting an education. And I don't have to go through the crazy college application process of, losing sleep over SATs and GPAs and things like that. Like, I can really just learn, and I don't need a grade to tell me if I've learned it or not. It's verified. I have to learn it to get onto the next stage of the course or the game or however you see the thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it will look a lot different. Yeah, you'll be earning money while you learn. Degrees will be much more standardized to some context as well, right? I think a lot of current students will enjoy this model a lot more, especially given where society is today.
Do you see this educational model applying to all majors, all sectors, or only like tech, for instance?
It's a really good question, and I think it will only apply to this new crypto digital world, right? So I firmly believe that there'll be like a new types of jobs that emerge with crypto. Like I think that being like a creator will become like a crypto job, and being like a curator of just like curating what data is valuable to everyone else will be another job. But like these will be jobs you can learn in this new type of university, right? That you'll know that you can go to like a RabbitHole university for example. But things in the physical world, you'll still need a real degree. You'll still need to go. I think STEM as a whole and as a major will always be around, right? Because those are things that you can't replicate or prove on chain in some capacity. You actually need to do real physical work to prove those things out.
Right, or being a lawyer or something.
Yeah,
I wonder if you could put law school on this model. It's
yeah,
interesting.
it'd be interesting.
Yeah. All right. The next tweet that I found that was interesting is you tweeted also on February 6th, got busy that day. Minting and selling NFTs is the easiest business to start in the world. Okay. So we've sort of talked about minting and selling NFTs already. But I was wondering if you have any insight or if you've thought about, if you actually were serious about starting an NFT business, what would be some good business practices to implement in terms of how to set up your business, how to go about marketing it, and things like that.
What's interesting about NFTs is that you don't need an entity or a bank account to get started, right? All you're doing is essentially putting in an image, minting it, and then selling it to someone else, right? That is a business in itself, right? It is the easiest business to start in the entire world. It's easier than setting up a lemonade stand for most people, right? And that's what's like so interesting about it, because now instantly anyone can create their digital economy with in less than 2 to 5 minutes worth of work, as long as they have a crypto wallet in some cases. So that's kind of what I meant by that tweet. And so I think you'll see a lot of people starting to explore this NFT minting model as a primary means of making money, in the same way that everyone has started to become like a YouTube creator as a means of making money in the past decade.
Okay, awesome. So tell people a little bit more about who Brian is outside of work and outside of crypto. What are some of your hobbies? What are any cool, interesting facts about you that you want to share?
Yeah, so I'm actually really big into VR fitness. That's kind of like my main hobby. I spend too much time indoors. So I'm really into the idea of using technology to help with like intrinsic motivation for people. Um, so the concept of VR fitness itself is like, how can we make games that help people for reasons that are not harmful to them in themselves, right? And so I've been really into you know just working out in VR, and really trying to prove that this is like a really good model for other people to use, right? And talking to a lot of people in the industry about how we can use VR as means of getting people fit. So I think that's one thing. I think I also play soccer a lot. I used to play soccer in college. So you get to get out and do that every couple of days. And yeah, that's it. Just spending most of my time just exploring and breathing crypto, because it really does feel like the early internet stages, and it's hard to get away from it. Everyone in crypto always makes a joke that like once you're in crypto, you can never get out. That's all you think about.
I mean, that's so true. I'm still relatively new to the space and I'm already feeling that. So I think that's absolutely true. What are some VR fitness companies or brands or like that people can check out?
Yeah. So Beat Saber is one of the most popular VR applications a lot of people use for fitness. FitXR is another one that I really like, that has boxing and dancing. Your Fit is another VR fitness app that's kind of an extension on Oculus, and just basically shows like a competitive leaderboard with your friends and built on top of different VR games. But those are the ones that I personally like.
Got it. Okay, cool. And then I've got a couple of just quick, fun, random little questions before we wrap up here. The first one is, I feel like you have something to say about this. If you could go back and redo college, knowing what you know now, what's one thing you would do differently?
Drop out.
Really? Why do you say that?
Um, you, get- you start to realize how little value college gives as a whole. If you find ways to get your social connections that university provides, then you can just have that in other ways. And college is way overvalued.
Interesting. Well, this is probably why you're friends with David Kabrowski, right? Who we had on the last episode. We talked a lot about dropping
Maybe.
out of college there. All right. And then second one, if you were stranded on a desert island with only one other person, who would you want that person to be? And it can be anybody dead or alive.
Hmm. That's a really good question. Um, can I come back to this after the next question?
Yeah, yeah. Let's just sub in another one. Here's an easier one. If you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want to have?
Teleportation.
Okay, pretty
Yeah,
standard, but I like it.
yeah. You'll never be bored in your entire life. You can go wherever you want instantly.
That's true. That's true. All right, awesome. Well, before you go, Brian, tell people where they can find you if they want to connect with you personally, as well as where they can go to learn more about Rabbit Hole and what are some of the, fun and interesting, like easiest things they can do as soon as they sign up on Rabbit Hole.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Flynn Jam, two M's, two M's. Then you can Rabbit Hole at rabbithole_GG. The website for Rabbit Hole is rabbithole.gg, and that's where you can sign up.
Thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and we'll be back again soon with another episode of Startup Happy Hour.
Thanks for having me, Dana.